The night of the coronation was cold and clear, and the moon hung low over Draven Peak like a watching eye. Every wolf in the kingdom had gathered in the great stone courtyard to witness the crowning of their new ruler, Alpha King Kaelin Draven. He stood tall on the raised platform, his dark eyes calm and proud, his shoulders carrying the weight of a bloodline that had ruled for 300 years. Among the crowd, pressed quietly near the back, stood a young woman named Elira Voss. She was a healer from a small, disgraced pack that lived at the edge of the territory. She had come only to deliver herbs to the palace kitchens, not to be seen. Elira had not spoken a single word since she was a child, when an attack on her village had taken her voice along with her family. She communicated through gestures, through her eyes, through the gentle steadiness of her hands. Most wolves barely noticed her. She preferred it that way. But that night, everything changed. As Kaelin lifted his head to accept the crown, his wolf stirred violently inside him, straining against his control. His gaze swept across the courtyard and locked, without warning, onto Elira. A sharp, burning sensation spread across his wrist, and gasps rippled through the crowd as a silver mark appeared on his skin, glowing faintly beneath the moonlight. Elira felt the same fire on her own wrist and stumbled back, clutching her arm in shock. The pack elders exchanged startled glances. There was no mistaking it. The moon goddess had chosen a mate for the new king, right there, in front of everyone. Kaelin stared at Elira as if seeing a ghost. He had always imagined his mate would be someone of noble blood, someone powerful, someone who could stand beside him as an equal ruler. Instead, the moon had given him a silent healer from a broken pack, a woman with no rank, no fortune, and no voice to advocate for herself. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Elira felt every eye on her, felt the weight of judgment pressing down on her chest. She wanted to explain, to speak, to tell them she had not asked for this, but no words came, only the frightened rise and fall of her breath. Kaelin's jaw tightened. In front of his entire kingdom, on the very night he was meant to prove his strength as their new leader, he refused to be bound to someone who could not even speak his name. Pride, fear, and the crushing expectations of his throne clouded his judgment. "She is not fit to stand beside a king," he said, his voice cold and final. "I reject this bond." The words struck Elira like a blow. Rejection was not just painful for an ordinary wolf. For a chosen mate, it was a wound that cut down to the soul. She felt it rip through her chest, sharp and merciless, but she did not cry out. She could not. She simply lowered her eyes, turned, and walked away from the crowd, her silence somehow louder than any sob could have been. That night, Kaelin announced his intention to marry Lady Seraphine instead, a beautiful and ambitious wolf from a powerful allied pack. Seraphine had waited years for this moment, and she smiled triumphantly as the crown was finally placed upon Kaelin's head. She did not care about fate or moon bonds. She cared about power, and now it was hers to claim. Elira was given no formal punishment, but she did not need one. She was moved to the servant quarters, given menial tasks far beneath her healing skills, and mostly ignored by the court. Seraphine made sure of that, dropping cruel remarks whenever she passed, reminding Elira that she would never belong among royalty. Yet even in her humiliation, Elira did not complain. She continued her work quietly, tending to the sick in the lower village, wrapping wounds, brewing remedies from herbs she gathered in the forest at dawn. Those who knew her found comfort in her gentle presence, even if she never said a word. One person, however, began to suspect there was more to Elira than the court realized. Elder Mira, the keeper of pack lore and ancient prophecy, had watched the mate-marking ceremony with quiet unease. She remembered old stories passed down through generations, stories rarely spoken aloud because they were considered myths by most modern wolves. There was a prophecy, old as the kingdom itself, about a silent healer who would be marked by a proud king, rejected in cruelty, and would still carry within her the future of the entire bloodline. The prophecy spoke of a child, born of fate rather than politics, who would unite fractured packs and restore balance to a kingdom torn by pride and greed. Elder Mira began watching Elira more closely, though she said nothing yet. She wanted to be certain before she spoke such dangerous words to a new king who had already made his choice clear. Weeks passed. Kaelin noticed, with growing frustration, that something was wrong with him. His strength, once effortless, now felt strained. His temper flared unpredictably. At night, his wolf paced restlessly, refusing to settle, as though mourning something Kaelin refused to name. He told himself it was simply the pressure of his new crown. He refused to consider that rejecting his mate might have consequences beyond her own pain. Seraphine noticed his restlessness too, and it worried her. She doubled her efforts to secure her position, whispering in his ear about strength and unity, trying to distract him from the quiet ache neither of them fully understood. Then, one morning, Elira was gone. She had packed only a small bag, taken nothing that was not hers, and slipped away from the palace before dawn. She could no longer bear the humiliation, the stares, the constant reminder that she had been publicly discarded by the very man the moon had chosen for her. She made her way to Ashwood, a quiet village on the neutral border between packs, where no one knew her name or her story. There she found simple work as a healer, and for the first time in weeks, she felt she could breathe without the crushing weight of judgment. Back at the palace, Kaelin's condition worsened. His advisors grew concerned, as their king's power visibly weakened during pack trials, something unheard of for an alpha of his bloodline. It was Elder Mira who finally approached him, her expression grave. "You rejected your fated mate," she said plainly, without the softness she usually reserved for her king. "A bond like that does not simply disappear because you wish it to. It is tearing you apart from the inside, Kaelin, and if you do not correct this, it may cost you far more than your strength." Kaelin wanted to dismiss her words as superstition, but he could not deny what his body was telling him. Every night, the ache grew sharper. Every day, his control grew thinner. For the first time since the coronation, doubt crept into his heart. "Where is she?" he finally asked. Elder Mira did not know exactly, but she knew Elira had likely sought refuge somewhere quiet, somewhere far from the cruelty of the court. Kaelin began his search in secret, unwilling to admit to his court that the king who had rejected his mate now desperately needed to find her. It took nearly a month of searching before word reached him of a silent healer living in Ashwood, known throughout the village for her gentle hands and quiet kindness. Kaelin rode there himself, his heart pounding with an emotion he refused to name. When he found her, Elira was kneeling beside an elderly villager, carefully wrapping a wound with practiced hands. She looked healthier than he remembered, her cheeks fuller, her eyes calmer, though something about her had changed. When she looked up and saw him standing there, her whole body went still. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Kaelin noticed it. The slight curve of her stomach beneath her healer's apron, unmistakable now that he was close enough to see clearly. His breath caught in his throat. "Elira," he said quietly, "are you?" She did not need words to answer him. She simply placed a protective hand over her stomach, her eyes steady, daring him to reject her again. Kaelin felt something inside him break open, a mixture of shame, wonder, and fear he had never experienced before. He had spent his life believing that strength meant control, that weakness meant vulnerability. But standing before this silent woman, who had endured his cruelty without a single word of complaint, he understood for the first time how wrong he had been. He requested that the village healers confirm what his instincts already told him. Within days, it was certain. The child Elira carried was strong, healthy, and unmistakably marked with the signs of alpha royal blood, a rare and powerful trait that appeared only in true heirs of the Draven bloodline. This was no ordinary pup. This was the child of a true mate bond, exactly as the old prophecy had foretold. Word of the discovery could not be contained for long. When it reached the palace, Seraphine's carefully built world began to crumble. She had spent months preparing to become queen, and now a silent healer she had mocked and dismissed was carrying the one thing she could never give Kaelin, a true royal heir born of fate. Desperate, Seraphine attempted to convince the council that the child's claim was false, that Elira had manipulated the situation for her own gain, but her lies unraveled quickly under questioning, and several members of the court who had quietly disapproved of her cruelty toward Elira came forward with accounts of her manipulative behavior over the past months. Her reputation, carefully built through charm and ambition, collapsed under the weight of her own dishonesty. Kaelin returned to the palace with Elira by his side, though he did not force her. He asked her, gently and sincerely, if she would allow him the chance to make things right. Elira, though still cautious, saw something different in his eyes now: humility where there had once been pride, and regret where there had once been coldness. In front of the same courtyard where he had once rejected her, Kaelin knelt before Elira. He spoke clearly, so that no one could mistake his words or his intentions. "I let my pride blind me to what truly mattered," he said. "I judged her silence as weakness, when it was, in truth, the greatest strength I have ever witnessed. She endured my cruelty without complaint, and still she carries hope for this kingdom's future within her. I was wrong to reject her, and I ask, before all of you, for the chance to earn back what I so carelessly threw away." Elira looked at him for a long moment. She thought of the pain she had carried, the humiliation, the lonely nights in Ashwood. But she also thought of the child growing within her, a child who deserved a united family, and a kingdom at peace, rather than one divided by pride. Slowly, she extended her hand toward him, not in forgiveness of everything all at once, but as a beginning. Kaelin took her hand gently, relief and gratitude flooding through him. Elder Mira stepped forward and performed the binding ceremony properly this time, declaring Elira as the true mate of the Alpha King, and her unborn child as the rightful heir to the Draven throne. The courtyard, once filled with judgmental whispers, now echoed with respectful silence and, slowly, genuine applause. In the months that followed, Elira remained quiet in voice, but her presence grew louder in influence. She used gentle gestures and the growing bond she shared with Kaelin to communicate, and over time, the pack learned to understand her without words. She continued her healing work, now with the full resources of the palace behind her, tending not just to the sick, but to the divisions within the kingdom itself, quietly encouraging unity between the packs that had long been fractured by pride and old rivalries. Kaelin changed as well. The arrogance that had once defined him softened into a quiet strength, one built not on domination, but on partnership. He learned to read Elira's silences, to understand the depth of feeling behind her steady gaze, and he came to cherish the parts of her that he had once so foolishly dismissed. When their child was finally born, a healthy pup with eyes that shone silver under the moonlight, the entire kingdom celebrated. The old prophecy had come true, not through conquest or bloodshed, but through humility, patience, and a love that had survived rejection to become something far stronger than pride alone could ever build. Elira never spoke a single word throughout the entire journey. Yet by the end, everyone in the kingdom understood exactly what she had been trying to say all along. Some of the most powerful voices are the quiet ones, and some of the deepest bonds are forged not in comfort, but in the courage to remain gentle, even when the world has been unkind. And so, under the watchful light of the moon that had chosen them from the very beginning, the Alpha King and his silent mate ruled together, their kingdom stronger, for having learned, at last, that true strength was never about how loudly one spoke, but about how deeply one could love.